Hey, welcome back to Engineer's Workshop. Let's show you what I've been up to. It's been a couple of projects for the house and trying to get a little bit done on the Skinner steam engine, the slide valve actuator for that. First I got to cut a piece of molding. I have to laminate it because of course every piece of molding in this old house we have is thicker than what standard lumber is available now. So I wanted to show you what I'm thinking of using for a rip fence for the Rockwell table saw, and that's this extrusion. These extrusions are called 80/20. There's a couple of different brands, but they're all similar. And this is a single height variety, and it's an anodized aluminum piece. It's got a kind of a T-slot for mounting, and I'm thinking about making a fence out of this where I have a piece that will square against the front of the saw table. Another method is, if you're old enough to remember the old drafting tables that have the wire strung in between the parallel edge, there's a way to do that with this. You have to make a cable system going around three sides of the saw and attach to the underside of the arm, and then you basically clamp, end to end, but you can just grab one end of the rip fence and move it, and the cables take the other end along for the ride, and it just stays parallel. So that's another way to do it. Might just do it that way, but let's set this up real quick and do a rip cut, show you how this works on this. Before I do that though, let me show you the saw that I'm removing from the small shop to make room for this one. So the saw that I'm replacing up in the big shop is a Beech 18-inch table saw. And this item here with the R on it, that's the outrigger. And the outrigger sits about 3.5 to 4 feet outboard of the actual table saw body. So if you can picture a cabinet about that size in the middle, you've got one of these outriggers on either side. The blade guard is actually a casting with wheels that ride on the tabletop itself, and this has to be mounted to like a ceiling mount, something coming in from overhead. And then this wooden contraption is the right-hand extension table. Both of the extension tables have these solid steel rollers, and this helps you to roll a piece of paneling, like a 4x8 piece of plywood, across the saw. And then the ball bearing wheels ride on this rail. Now these rails, it's just commercial angle, I believe, but then the top surface is machined parallel to the bottom edge. And then the entire assembly is mounted on, it's probably a full-size 2-inch by 5-inch or so wood block that's adjustable in slots up and down to make the travel of this parallel with the travel of the table itself. So unfortunately, until I have the rest of this fence set up, I have to square the edges manually, and it's always good practice to have the outfeed just a hair farther out than the infeed side. So I typically set 1/16th to a 32nd of an inch difference between the front and the back of the saw. But I got my depth of cut, and I'm just looking for enough of a skim cut to true this edge. Make sure my saw is on 90 degrees, which it is, running at 50 hertz. Ends up with a pretty nice cut. It's usually better when you do a full width cut and the saw blade is actually taking full width of material off. I'm not going to do the other side until I determine the exact width of the molding piece that I need. By reversing my jaws, the geometry of this part gives me an interesting opportunity to hold it in the small 4-jaw chuck, because the pilot end in that is just small enough to fit through. So I'm kind of clamped on the outer body of the flange, which just is, rough casting. But I can indicate here, that's a machine surface, and that was turn, and then hopefully the bore will run true enough. And what I've got to do is start to take out this, what I assume is like a petrified rubber packing. You can't quite pick it with your fingernail, but if I go in there with a screwdriver, you know, it does kind of chunk out. Maybe it's like some sort of a graphite. So let's get an indicator on here and see how true we can get this to run. I'd say I'm running within 2 thousandths TIR, which isn't bad for a rough surface like that. Let's see if I can see what the bore is doing. Condition of that is no better. Well, 5 thousandths or so, very pitted in there. Let's run this at a slow speed and let's see what the boring bar does with this chunky rubber material. Well, it should be fairly well balanced despite the fact that it's oval. So I'm only going to play with about the first inch or so of this bushing. I already had my feed in the right direction. Feels like rubber. Okay, so this is chunking out in like individual rings. They were all kind of glazed and smushed together. Yeah, that first set is pretty much gone. So let's advance the compound another ½ inch. It looks like I'm within maybe, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch of being as far as I can go, and then I'm going to hit steel. Yeah, that's I can see the bottom of the counter bore, so that's as far as I can take the tool. Now, so here's the packing that was in there. These are, don't know what they are, but they're pretty hard. They're definitely fibrous. I think they're V-shaped, and then maybe there's conical ones that match in the other way. But you can see that's just a straight counter bore down through there. And then this packing, this graphite cord packing, I'm going to cut 3 or 4 donuts of this and wrap around the rod, and then stagger the joints and push that down against the bottom of that counter bore to seal that. Might put a wrap of 150 grit sandpaper around a rod and stick that rod in there and polish up that bore a little bit to get rid of the remnants of the packing material that's still adhering to it. I didn't take the boring bar clear up until it was hitting the side of that, but that did what I was intending to do. I'd say that's cleaned out pretty good, ready for the new packing. So that project went pretty well. Like I said, probably will bush this. Well, I did bush it, but it's a little sloppier than I would have liked, but easy enough to press this out and do it again. So I'll get work on getting this reassembled with the packing and get it back into the engine and see how much nicer that motion is. Well, that's all I got for you this time. It ain't much, but it is what it is. So a little bit of progress. Obviously, a little bit of things had to do on the house projects as well. You know, got to keep those domestic projects working, and that way you can have the time to do a little bit of the for fun stuff. So anyway, thanks again for watching and subscribing. I will be back with you again next week for another video. So until then, as always, stay safe.